and welcome to the Casual Cinecast, powered by Cinelinx. My name is Chris.
My name is Justin.
And my name is Mike. Today's episode, we'll be going over What's on Our Minds, followed by a Season 1 review of Barry, starring Bill Hader, and then a feature review of The Tale, directed by Jennifer Fox and starring Laura Dern. So we're going all HBO today.
All HBO, all the time.
That's right.
This week.
That sounded like a slogan of theirs, maybe, in my head, but it probably never was.
Yeah, it seems like a pretty generic slogan that could belong to anybody, I guess.
Yeah, it's somebody's slogan, no doubt. Yeah.
Trademark it, sell it to HBO. I'm sure they're looking for a new slogan.
Yeah, so if you want to let us know whose slogan that is, you can do so on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Casual Cinecast. If you want to talk film and TV with us, you can join our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/Casual Cinecast. Or if you want to email us directly, you can do so at casualcinemedia@gmail.com.
All right, guys, so before we get into what's on our minds, I wanted to go ahead and address some feedback we got from the solo episode last week. We have someone who wrote into the show who was very unhappy with our dismissal of the prequel trilogy, which was, I guess, The Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, and then Revenge of the Sith. Apparently, they have their defenders, and none of them were on this podcast. So I just wanted to shout out that, yep, the prequel trilogy does, in fact, have its fans. It is not written in stone that they are the worst Star Wars movies.
Yep.
And anyway, we got a lot of feedback on those rankings. Everyone seemed to like ranking the Star Wars movies, so we will be sure and try to do more Star Wars content, more rankings in the future. It's fun to have that kind of feedback.
Yeah, if you guys have any ideas on things that we could rank for you, let us know. We'll put together an episode, most likely, unless it's really weird.
We love a good ranking.
Yeah, I would be super excited to rank different kinds of cheeses. That would be nice to do. So if someone could send that in.
Give me an excuse to try more cheeses. I don't try enough cheeses.
Yeah, welcome to Casually Cheese.
Oh, we can keep the 2C logo when we do Casual Cheese.
Yep, absolutely. It's going to be great.
Awesome. All right, well, you guys ready to talk about what's on our minds?
Yes, I am.
Yep.
All right, Mike, do you want to go first?
All right, so the first thing I wanted to talk about this week is a foreign film called A Fantastic Woman, directed by Sebastian Lelio, I believe. But this is about a transgender woman named Marina, who is dating an older man, and they're planning to have like a future together, and they're planning on living together, and then suddenly he dies. So all of a sudden, Marina has to deal with the fallout of that, and his family, and suspicious looks, and anyway, it's just about what this poor woman has to endure, all because she lost a loved one, you know, and the world didn't understand their relationship, and it's very sweet. It reminded me a lot of a Pedro Almodovar movie. Is that right? How do you say his name?
I believe that was right.
It might be Almodovar.
Almodovar?
Yeah, but
right.
I'm not
anyway,
sure on that.
Yeah, he directed Voltaire and, oh goodness, help me, Justin.
All About Her, or no, All About My Mother and Talk to Her. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, he's done a lot of really great, important movies, usually having to do with sex. Anyway, yeah, Fantastic Woman is really good.
This was nominated at least for Best Foreign Picture at the Oscars this year. I can't remember if it won or not, but I think it did.
Yeah, well, anyway, it deserves it. It's really great. I would say it's very personal, really well paced, and made with love. It's filmed beautifully, and it's acted really well. So I don't know, see it.
Yeah, I thought it looked great when they showed like clips from it at the Oscars, and I've been wanting to see it ever since. So I'm jealous that you've seen it and I haven't. So I will correct that soon.
Yeah, I had no idea what it was about when I sat down to watch it, other than it was going to be about a fantastic woman. Yeah. So I didn't even realize like what genre it was, a drama or what. I didn't even know it was about a transgendered person.
Yeah, me neither. I didn't know what it was about until just now when you told me.
Yeah. So I hope I didn't ruin it for anyone.
Spoiler alert, Mike.
Yeah, I gave you the basic plot. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was the 5th season of Arrested Development, which dropped on May 29th. Well, I guess the first half of season 5 of Arrested Development, which is super frustrating, actually, because I don't think that the season was planned to be cut in half like that, or at least it doesn't feel like it.
No, not at all.
It feels like Netflix just kind of arbitrarily cut it in half, and there's no real closure in the 8 episodes you get so far. So it's kind of unsatisfying initially, but personally, I love it.
I'm sorry, real quick before you get into it, what was the reasoning that they cut it in half? Do you know?
Well, they said it was for Emmy consideration. Like there was like an Emmy deadline they needed to meet. And so there was like a cutoff point. So I guess releasing the first 8 episodes on May 29th fit within that deadline so that they would be qualifiable for whatever kind of awards they wanted.
Yes. So they're probably still working on the second half.
Okay.
And finishing those. So, yeah, they probably just couldn't have the entire season ready in time is what it sounds like.
Do we have a release date for the second half?
No, I think usually it's like a couple months after. So we'll probably get it in July or August or something.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so anyway, I absolutely had a blast watching these episodes. It's a little rocky at first because it has a lot of wrapping up Season 4 to do, and Season 4 was really plot-heavy. So I think there's a couple episodes in the beginning of Season 5 that are kind of slow, but once it gets going, in my opinion, it feels just like some of the best parts of Arrested Development. Like, the ridiculousness is back, the weird political satire. Yeah, so after I watched them, I hopped right on Reddit, and I started looking at all the jokes and things that I missed, and watched them again, you know? So that's the beauty of that show, in my opinion, is just the rewatchability of it, and all the stuff that you don't catch the first time, in my opinion, just makes it one of the most entertaining sitcoms. And if you had any problems with Season 4, I would say give Season 5 a shot, but just realize that it maybe takes a minute to get going. But the biggest bummer is, I think, right when it starts getting really great, and once they finally start coming together, it just cuts off. You know, we just don't get any more episodes. So it's a super huge bummer, and it's hard to know how you feel about the season as a whole.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I've watched the whole Season 5, Part 1, 2. That's a weird sentence now that I say it.
Yeah, that is confusing.
Yeah, Part 1 also. So I think I have a bit of a different opinion than you, although kind of in a similar way. Like I thought that it starts pretty slow, and I actually feel like it didn't pick up until maybe the last 2 episodes is where I found myself like really enjoying it. Mm-hmm. And of course, you know, with 2 episodes left, it just literally, like right when it picks up, it kind of ends for me, which is a bit disappointing. I think so far, based on this first half, I enjoyed the re-edit of Season 4 more than what I've gotten out of the first half. But it does make me excited to see the second half and see what they're setting up in this half that like I won't understand until I see the second half, right? And
sure.
Once I see the second half, going back and rewatching this half will probably be significantly better, I think. That's kind of always the way Arrested Development works, although I feel like in this season and Season 4, they kind of took this Netflix platform that they're on now, like where things are binged and watched all together, and they kind of stretch out arcs and plots like a lot further than they used to. Like,
right. It's kind of a different show altogether, structure-wise.
Yeah, so it's a little bit different, and sometimes I kind of miss the things that come in and out in like a few episodes. Like, for example, Season 3, where Charlize Theron comes into the show, and she's there for like 3 episodes, and then gone. All? Yeah, that it feels like more, right? Because it's so important, and it's such a big like story arc. But they squeezed it into like 3 episodes, and those are probably my favorite 3 episodes of the whole series. And so I miss things like that because I feel like they're not doing that too much. Everything is like designed to like play out over an entire season. Mm-hmm. Do you feel that way sometimes?
Yeah. So the way I look at it is seasons 1 through 3 of Arrested Development are this thing that they will never top. Right? No matter what they do, no matter how they restructure, even if they were trying to do it the exact same, you're never going to top something that was so of its time, of a time and place, and you just can't replicate that, you know? But what I would say is that even the later seasons like that of Arrested Development that are more overarching stories, you know, going over longer periods, less of the sitcom formula, I would say even those later seasons are still wildly more entertaining than like 90% of all the comedies that I can think of on TV, right? So although I would agree that like seasons 4 and 5 are different and they're not as good as seasons 1 through 3. But basically, yes, I do miss it. But overall, I'd say that I'm happy we're getting any Arrested Development at all at this point. So I'll take the overarching long stories.
Right, yeah, that makes sense. And
there are... Oh, I'm sorry, go on.
Well, it's not what, like, totally makes me dislike the show. It's just things that I miss that I would like to see a little bit more that we could follow within, like, a few episodes and be done with. And, like, with these, you really, like, they're better off being binged because it feels like each season builds and builds and builds and builds and, like, starts paying off towards the end. Or granted, like you said, I'm only talking about the first half of season 5, but, like, even that first half, like, it takes, like, 5-6 episodes, at least for me, for, like, the wheel to, like, really start rolling and get going, you know, and that's how season 4 felt too. So I just...
Yeah, and I hear what you're saying, and I think that comes from the fact that whenever Arrested Development was originally on, it was on TV as a sitcom, and so they had to do it that way, right? But then I think whenever the show came back alive, it was all because people were binging them on DVD. You know, like college kids were buying them and stuff. So I think the way he looked at it, he was like, I was ahead of my time then, so now I need to, like, adapt to the way they started watching us. Like you and I, when you and I first started watching Arrested Development, we binged it. So I think there's just as much comedy to be had in season 4. Like, I've seen season 4 probably 3 times now. I think seasons 4 and 5, they benefit from rewatching probably more than the first 3 seasons, which also benefit from rewatching, you know? But these are made to rewatch. They're made for, like, that lasting value. Like, I'm still discovering things on season 4, and I feel like I haven't even scratched the surface of all the comedy and all the jokes that are just sprinkled throughout that thing.
Chris, are you still here?
Yeah, I'm still here. I was just going to pitch in. I've only seen the first episode, and I enjoyed it for the most part, but I was going to ask you guys if you think I should wait for the full season to come out, or if I should go ahead and watch the first half of the season.
Here's what I would say. I enjoyed the first episode as well. If you enjoyed the first episode and you laughed at all, I would keep going. But have you watched any of the season 4 re-edit?
Yeah, I hadn't finished that yet. I'd watched probably about half of it.
If you want to, I would watch that whole thing and just go straight into season 5, even the first half, and I think that would probably make it better, because you'd be acclimated to the new Netflix kind of tone. Another
weird thing, just quickly to point out, that I think feels weird, and is that these episodes in season 5 aren't the, like, 22-minute, like, normal sitcom, like, for syndication length. Like, some of them are, like, 30 minutes.
Yeah,
which
the last
makes the episodes feel a little bit longer than normal, which is kind of unrelated, but I think that's to the show's detriment, but that might just be me. And to answer your question, Chris, I think that you should just go ahead and watch them. I mean, it's going to pay off if you watch them now and then maybe rewatch them again before the second part comes out. Like Mike said, you know, watching Arrested Development again only makes it better. That's always been the case. I think it'll be the case with these. So I don't think watching them now will hurt. I don't think it'll in any way make you not want to see part 2 by the end of it. Because like we said, by the end, it gets rolling, you know, and you're like ready for more immediately.
Oh man, that last episode, I was cracking up. Job is so funny in these last 2 episodes, and his plot line, the way it's unfolding so far, I cannot wait to see how it keeps going. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say.
He has the most interesting things going on, I think.
Yeah, and it's good to see Michael back in form again. I think in season 4, my biggest complaint with the whole thing, that wasn't even the structure, it was that, like, I didn't like Michael anymore, you know? Everyone in this show kind of needs to have their place, and I think season 5 is steering the ship towards being righted. And I can see the second half being a lot more enjoyable now that the first half's done a lot of the heavy legwork. Because, like you said, those last 2 episodes, they feel like old Arrested Development.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah, and hopefully, like you said, they're steering the ship in the right direction, and hopefully they don't decide to turn it around and head back to shore.
Indeed. But I still like season 4, so as an Arrested Development fan from way back who did enjoy season 4, even if it doesn't feel like seasons 1 through 3, and it starts to feel a lot like season 4 by the end of it, I'm still okay with it. It's not as good as I wish it was, but hey, some Arrested Development is, like I said, better than most things.
For sure, agreed.
Cool, I'll have to check it out with the 2 votes for.
Yeah, let me know what you think.
Will do.
All right, so, Justin, what's been on your mind besides Arrested Development?
Besides Arrested Development, the 2018 World Cup rosters came out. Do you guys want to talk about that?
Nope. Sure don't, but I will. Because I know you care.
Well, I care, but I know no one else does. I was expecting a hard no.
Then I stand by my no.
Okay. Chris, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I'm gonna I'll go with the hard no.
Okay. All right, fair enough.
A hard one.
All right, I'll just move on. So, since you guys don't want to talk about it, I will talk about the new Michelle Wolf show on Netflix. It's called The Break with Michelle Wolf. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with her. I believe she started on The Daily Show as like a correspondent, and she left that to do this Netflix show. And she recently got a lot of popularity because she did like the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and it was really anti-Trump and anti-Republican and bashed them pretty hard, and people were upset about it. Did you guys see that?
Imagine that. I heard about it.
Yeah, I saw some parts of it.
Yeah, so she has a show on Netflix. It's basically like The Daily Show, and it's one of their shows that they're doing on Netflix, which I find interesting, where they're releasing an episode every week as opposed to releasing a bunch at once, which I think makes sense for a show like this where you're tackling like current news and political topics. But yeah, they've released like one episode. I think yesterday, as of this recording, they had released a second episode, which I haven't watched yet. But the first one was pretty decent. I find her funny most of the time. Like, she's got kind of a voice you have to get used to.
Yeah, that's the only thing I really know about her. I came home on lunch one day, and my girlfriend was watching her show, and I heard her talk, and I was like, what are you watching? And then she said it was Michelle Wolf, and I was like, oh, okay, I've heard of her. She's supposed to be good. But my initial reaction was that of like, turn that off.
Yeah, the show is about half good. Like, I think if you enjoy The Daily Show, it's kind of got that John Oliver vibe because they can be more vulgar and they can be more explicit. You know, they're not limited by censorship of like cable television or whatever.
Does she do like in-depth investigative stuff like John Oliver does?
Not so far. It's kind of seemed like she did take one topic of like feminism and women and rolled with it for almost the entire episode instead of a bunch of smaller things, but it wasn't like hard-hitting revealing stuff like what John Oliver does. Like, it was definitely comedy based.
Sure.
More than information based. But I enjoyed it. I'm going to watch the second one. I don't know if we need another TV show like this, but
yeah, well, when the market's ripe.
But it's decent. I would recommend watching like the first episode. It's about half hits and half misses. So I'm curious to see where it's going to go.
Is it informative at all? I know you said it wasn't information based, but I mean,
is it more like, comedy or more news?
Is it like more commenting on news or yeah?
Yeah, it's more comedy. Like I believe the show title The Break is because she wants it to be more of a break. Like, they'll talk politics and make humor out of it, but she wants it to primarily be funny and not necessarily trying to sway opinion, although it's very clear from the first episode that it will be opinionated and will be like, you know, leaning in the same political direction as The Daily Show. But so I watched that, and I also watched another Netflix original, which was a 4-episode, I guess docuseries would be the right word, but it's called Evil Genius. And it's kind of done, I think, trying to like play off the success of Making a Murderer. It's a documentary about this crime where someone called a pizza delivery guy and got him to deliver a pizza. And when he was there, they strapped a bomb around his neck and told him to go rob a bank, saying he had a bomb around his neck, and if he doesn't rob the bank, it's going to blow up and he's going to die. And he robs the bank, and cops eventually corner him on the street, and he's like laying in the street saying this bomb's going to explode, and eventually it does explode and the guy dies. And the whole show is investigating who masterminded this, like, and who put this together, and was the pizza delivery guy in on it? You know, did he know that it was going to be a real bomb? Was he in on it? Did he think it was going to be a fake bomb? All that sort of stuff. And it asks all these questions. Did either of you guys watch Making a Murderer?
I watched Making a Murderer, yeah.
No, not my thing.
So I think this is very much trying to do what Making a Murderer does. And long story short, I have to say that I do not recommend it, because the first episode, I think, really tries to set it up to be something really, really interesting. and like controversial, and like I don't know if controversial. I guess like a thing that you could discuss a lot, like Making a Murderer, where you can have different like opinions about it and who's innocent and who's guilty. And by the end, like it becomes really, really uninteresting right around like the middle of the third episode. Like everything kind of plays out the way that you thought it would, and like the way that they set it up. So like it was a really good like first 2 episodes, and then the last 2, like they were just super disappointing and like got less and less interesting, which is not what you want a documentary or movie or anything to really do.
Is it better than the Jesse Eisenberg Aziz Ansari movie that was inspired by this? 30 minutes or less? Yeah.
I don't remember because I saw that forever ago, but probably.
Newsflash,
like
it wasn't very good.
Yeah, I remember not liking it then, but I think I would rather watch that than Evil Genius. But to be fair to Evil Genius, it's 4 hour-long episodes, so it's kind of a big time investment compared to 30 minutes or less, which is longer than 30 minutes.
Yeah, these multi-hour crime documentary miniseries, I can only watch so many of these before I just get depressed. You know, like I watched The Jinx.
Oh, The Jinx. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, that was a few years back. Like, it seems like there's a new one of these every 6 months. I can't keep up with them all.
Netflix has really been coming out with them. They have the other one about the cult.
Yeah, that cult
Wild,
one
Wild
that was
Country.
popular like 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, they're constantly coming out with them. And I do agree with you. I don't mind watching them necessarily, but they oftentimes are depressing.
And it seems like every time they come out, 6 months later, there's always someone breaking some kind of news thing that they left out, and they're always highly inaccurate and more of entertainment anyway. So it's like, it's all just like a spectacle of depressing stuff that I don't want to, I'd rather watch fiction.
Yeah, I really enjoy them. Like personally, I loved Making a Murderer. I thought it was super interesting. I think I watched the first episode one day, and then the next day I started watching the second episode, and the second episode hooked me, and I ended up watching like all the rest of the 9 episodes left in like one night and stayed up till like 7 a.m. watching them. So I enjoy that kind of thing, and I was hoping to enjoy this, but I do not recommend it. I think it is not good in the end.
Well, that's good to know.
There you have it.
Yeah. So, Chris, what's on your mind?
Yeah, so this week I watched a sequel of sorts to Karate Kid. I watched Cobra Kai, and when I first heard about this show coming on, I thought that this show is going to be a giant garbage dumpster fire and not very good at all. However, I heard a couple of people say that they liked it and enjoyed it, and my roommate actually watched it, and he recommended it, so I watched the first one. And actually, as a kid, I never really watched Karate Kid young enough to have a nostalgic factor, so I'm not a big fan of Karate Kid.
Oh, wait, hang on. This show is a sequel to Karate Kid, the movie?
Yeah, Cobra Kai is the other karate dojo thing that was kind of the evil one that he had to like fight in the tournament at the end.
Oh. So it's a sequel. Does this have the Karate Kid in it?
Yeah, Ralph Macchio
there you
comes
go. That's
back.
His name. Thank you.
And both Ralph Macchio come back and William Zabka, who played the kid that fought Ralph Macchio in the very last fight in the first one.
Oh, man. I didn't even know this show existed.
Yeah, it's actually one of the bummers is that it's on YouTube Red, and so it's not on any other subscription service, and I'm not particularly fond of subscribing to another thing. But I really enjoyed this show. It's a lot of fun. They did a really smart thing where they kind of flipped it on its head, where they focused more on the Cobra Kai dojo that the Johnny Lawrence character opens up. So they focus on his life and what it's been like for the last 30 years. Yeah, the episodes are about 30 minutes long, so it's real easy. There's about 10 episodes, so it's kind of breezy. It's fun, emphasis on fun. So lots of kind of 80s nostalgia, lots of 80s music. The acting isn't superb.
I was about to ask you, how is Ralph Macchio?
Yeah, it's not superb, but they all look like they're having a lot of fun doing it, and I'm having fun watching them. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So is it a comedy? Like everything you've said just makes it sound like a comedy, or it sounds like something one would say about a comedy.
Yeah, I think that it's funny in parts, and by turning it on its head, there is some drama that takes place in it, by following Johnny Lawrence as opposed to Ralph Macchio. And they kind of take the archetypes and flip them on their heads. But yeah, there's parts that are funny and parts that are wink wink.
Like you're watching a sequel to something that's old.
Yeah, and they talk about the 80s and stuff, but it's really fun, and I recommend watching it if you get a chance. Except for there's one glaring casting issue, and I won't get into it, but just the casting was just, that one character was really annoying, and every time he was on screen, I kind of wanted him to go away. But yeah, other than that, I thought it was a really fun show. Yeah, and I'd recommend it.
Did you free trial your YouTube Red, or did you actually pay for like a month while you watch it?
I used my roommate's YouTube Red, so I believe he did a trial.
So was it worth borrowing a free trial for free to watch it?
Yeah, it's a free month is what I would say. So if you're going to sign up for YouTube Red for a free month and you want to watch Cobra Kai, absolutely. It's worth it. Just make sure you cancel it at the end of the month, as far as I can see. Because there's not really much else on YouTube Red, right? I think it gets rid of your YouTube ads.
I think this is why I've never heard of it.
Well, I'd seen advertisements for it, and the advertisements looked really awful, and I thought it was going to be a horrible show. That was why it took me so long to watch it in the first place, and I probably wouldn't have if I hadn't heard a lot of my friends and online people talking about it and saying that it was actually pretty good. And I watched the first episode, and I just kind of chugged through the rest of them, like in the last on my days off this week.
Yeah, so like as you're talking about it, I feel like I've heard of the show for a little bit now, like people mentioning it, but it never registered with me like what it was.
Yeah.
And I think because it's YouTube Red, it was completely off my radar of things that I could possibly watch,
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. I'm not going to subscribe to YouTube Red just for Cobra Kai, you know?
Yeah, I wasn't even a huge Karate Kid fan, but
exactly.
I'm not curious about this show.
It's a lot of fun. Justin, what's your relationship to Karate Kid?
I mean, I watched it when I was a kid, not too many times. I was more of a Mighty Ducks, Sandlot, Heavyweights.
I was more of a Three Ninjas kid.
I watched Three Ninjas a lot too. But yeah, I guess to compare Karate Movie to Karate Movie, I watched Three Ninjas way more than Karate Kid. But I've seen it and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the remake somewhat with Jackie Chan and Will Smith's kid.
Jackie Chan almost made me cry in that movie.
Yeah, that's my relationship.
You don't even have to like it that much, but there are interesting things that this does. It's not your ordinary sequel show. They explore things that aren't explored in the Karate Kid. It adds to the Karate Kid. Does that make sense? So instead, it builds around the Karate Kid, and I actually think makes Karate Kid better. I want to go back and watch both of them now.
Awesome.
Yeah. Cool. Are you guys ready to move on to Barry Season 1?
You betcha.
Hey, you. Yeah, you. What are you doing after you finish this great podcast you're listening to?
Well, whatever it is, you're going to blow that off and listen to the IMDb Journey Podcast instead, hosted by Daniel, that's me.
And Dean, that's me. Join us on our journey as we tackle the IMDb Top 250 list, breaking down one movie a week, giving our own rankings as we go, as well as our incredibly intelligent and insightful thoughts too.
We also throw in a random quiz or movie battle every once in a while and have a punt on it, because us Aussies, we love a good punt.
Daniel, this is a G-rated promo. You can't say that.
I said punt, Dean. Punt. You dickhead. So come join us on the journey by subscribing to the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or any other podcast apps, and follow us on Twitter at IMDb Journey.
And now back to your regular scheduled programming.
These people I take out, they're bad people. The money's good. It's a job.
Hey, man. Are you new to this class? Help me out.
Ryan, you're up.
I'm gonna do the scene with him.
And action. The acting class made me feel really good. I feel really motivated right now. These are professional actors. They're the real deal, and they say I got something.
Bravo! I just saw you go to a place tonight I have never seen before. Okay, I see you're still in that place. I'm gonna leave you to your process. They can wait till Monday.
Okay, so before we get going on Barry Season 1, we just wanted to warn you that we are going to start immediately with spoilers. There's no non-spoiler section for this, so if you have not seen Barry, check the show notes for the time when we are done with Barry and start talking about the tale.
All right, guys, so Barry. The IMDb synopsis says, a hitman from the Midwest moves to Los Angeles and gets caught up in the city's theater arts scene.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that's a perfect synopsis for this show.
It's so good.
That's a really funny synopsis, too, because usually the synopsis is the opposite, right? Someone moves out for the theater and then gets caught up into being a hitman.
Yeah. That's the hook, Chris. That's what makes the logline work, and probably what sold the show.
So I was thinking, since Mike and I have already talked on previous episodes, I was wondering what Justin thought about the TV show.
So Chris and I, we watched the first episode together when it aired, or not when it aired, but I guess like right after it was on and came up on HBO Now. And I was a little underwhelmed with it at the time. I thought that it was okay. I was kind of interested to see where it goes, but like I didn't really enjoy it. And by the end of the show, I enjoyed it more, but a lot of what I felt then kind of held true throughout the entire series. Like, and I'll sum it up like this. I think as a comedy, it fails for me. Like, I didn't find it too funny, like not even like laughing in my own head, like, or like smirking at things that were going on. I think as a sort of cool action drama that's kind of like in that Breaking Bad realm of action, I think it also fails. But as an acting like LA scene like dramedy, I think it shines. Like, that is all my favorite part, is when he's doing the acting stuff and the things that's going on with like the girl Sally. I think all of that is really great. Like, I love him in the acting class. I love Henry Winkler in it. Like, he's the one shining star in the show to me as far as comedy goes. I think he's hilarious most of the time. But yeah, so like, it's kind of a show that like 2/3 of it don't work for me, but I still enjoyed watching it on the whole because that 1/3 of him acting works so well. And maybe that's like me wanting a different show entirely. Like, maybe a whole show about that is what I would rather have. I thought Bill Hader overall was good, not great. I don't know if it's like you guys talking about it on the show and talking about how great Bill Hader was in the end, but I was a little underwhelmed. Like, I didn't get as much as I expected. I thought he was going to do more, but I thought he was pretty good, I guess. So yeah, what did you guys, I mean, do you guys want to recap? I know we talked about it in like previous episodes, but do you guys want to recap or?
Yeah, so overall, I'd say I thought this was a nice, breezy first season of a TV show. I'm glad it did not go on any longer, because I don't think it merits that many episodes, at least not with the story they have in season 1. I actually do think Bill Hader is really good in this show. It's nice to see him stretch his dramatic legs. Usually he sticks pretty much just to comedy. I always figured he could do something like this, so it's nice to see him play in that realm. I agree with you pretty much all the way through. I think this show, as a comedy, is not strong. It's not terrible. It's not painful to watch by any means. But the show really shines elsewhere. And that's in the character relationships with one another and watching Barry, I guess, wrestle with his own conscience about where to draw the line. All that, I think, is really fascinating. I think Henry Winkler, like you said, is the funniest part of the show for sure. But yeah, overall, I chuckled a few times. I don't think it was quite as unfunny as you said, but I think the show is definitely at its strongest when it embraces the black comedy aspect and the darker tone. Some of the characters are a little too comedic at times, or attempting to be a little too comedic at times, and I think we could talk about that a little bit more. But yeah, overall, I would definitely recommend it because the episodes are short, and it is definitely worth a shot, and I can see it getting a whole lot better in season 2.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Mike. I really enjoyed this TV show. I think I'd have to agree that it's not a laugh out loud show, and I don't have a problem with that. I think that the dark comedy of it is good, and there's suspense more towards the end of the series that's paid off really well, and I think it pays off so well because they established it in the beginning. It almost plays more like a 3-hour movie. I
agree with that.
So yeah, I believe that the first episodes, and like when I watched the first episode with Justin, I was not super impressed, and that's because I think that they were doing a lot of the groundwork to establish a lot of the stuff later on in the season. Now, there's an argument to be made: if you're not impressed with the first episode, is it still worth watching for the rest of it? But I would say yes in this case. binge it. Sit down, watch this instead of a movie. I think it's really good, especially like the last 3 episodes. Just kind of really blew me away, and I thought were really good. Henry Winkler is amazing. He's worth it by himself, I think.
I think that if you really hate the first episode, you shouldn't continue watching. While I agree that it gets better, I think that if you're just not into the tone or the balance of humor and action and the story altogether, like, I don't think it's going to change enough to warrant watching. But if you're kind of iffy on it, it does get better. Right.
The one aspect of this that didn't work for me, because I think I'm going to be mostly positive on the show, I'll start off with the negative thing, but like the Bolivians, were they?
Chechens.
Yeah, the Chechens, except for the hairless one, did not work for me. The Chechen group just kind of didn't work. I think that's probably what you guys are talking about when you talk about the comedy not working for the most part. But for me, like, the Chechens didn't work, and only in the later episodes did the hairless one start to work for me.
Yeah, I think by the end I liked him a little bit more than any of the other ones, but you're right that's kind of a big chunk of where they were trying to milk humor out of that just didn't work for me. Like, I would have rather been straight up bad guys.
Yeah, I think that comes from trying to balance the tone. You know, you make the bad guys comedic, so that way whenever you have to dive into the underworld element and it starts to get a little gruesome, you're never too far gone. And I think they should lean into that more. I think they should be more Fargo with it and kind of lean into the violence and the bleakness of it all. And I think the humor will come from that. And it feels like what they were trying to do was throw really, I don't know, goofy jokes in on like torture scenes and things like that. I think that's what really stopped it from working for me. It's not even that the jokes aren't particularly funny. It's that they're kind of sprinkled in throughout situations where I don't really want to joke.
Yeah, I would prefer it to stay, like you said, the bleakness. I would like it to stay in that realm, because that does enhance the danger or situation that Barry's in, which I think would be more successful than trying to get a laugh out of us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. I guess I never really worried for Barry, now that I'm thinking about it. I mean, I guess I could probably figure that he was not going to die because, you know, the show's called Barry and it's about him. But, you know, I still worried for Walter White in Breaking Bad from time to time. And
well, I worry that Barry's going to get caught, right?
I mean, yeah, that's one thing, but I'm not worried for his partner or his friend or his life, you know? Like, the villains don't seem very villainous at any point because they're so buffoonish.
Yeah, I think that's what doesn't quite work with the humor. I think you're spot on, Mike, when you said that let the comedy come out of the bleakness, but I think they try to make them very cartoonish. It's too far on the silly range for me to take like anything they're doing like very seriously, and if like the comedy is not working for you, like it's really bad for that whole section of the show. I think
you should watch Fargo season 1, Justin. I think you would like that show.
I want to real bad.
That show is real good.
Yeah, it seems like, to me, Barry reminded me a lot of Fargo, the TV show, only trying to be funnier.
Yeah, I could see that. There were 2 jokes that did work for me from the Bolivians, and
Chechens?
It was when the Chechens
or the Bolivians. See, the Bolivians do show up towards the end. They're the ones that show up like with the planes.
Okay, yeah. Well, actually, the joke is between the Bolivians and the Chechens. It's so the head guy that shows up in the airplane calls, and he's like, "All you had to do was call and talk to me. We could have worked this out," you know. And I thought that was a funny joke. They're so cordial to each other. I thought it was funny.
It's an okay joke. I think that joke would pay off better if the Chechens were very serious.
Like if they had been threatening as opposed to bumbling.
Yeah, and if they were like very serious and it was all this like big deal to them, and then the Bolivian calls and he's just super nice.
Yeah.
I think that works. It's a little more contrasting. Instead, he's just another guy, kind of like the bald Chechen guy who's like super friendly and polite.
Yeah, I think they're trying to play against type by making them friendly and stuff, but I don't know that it works. I agree with you guys.
Too
the other
much
one
of that is a bad thing.
Yeah, you're right. The other one is when Stephen Root convinces, or I'm not even sure if he convinces him, but convinces the old hitman to kill himself. I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah. See, I didn't. That did not work for me.
Yeah, I agree. I had that written on my list of things to talk about because I wanted to see if it worked for you guys, because it sure didn't for me.
Well, I thought the old man's performance was great. I thought he was selling it, but I don't know. I don't know. It felt weird.
Yeah, his performance was interesting, but then they tried to make a joke out of it, right? Like they tried to play that situation for humor a little too much. So like it just, and it was a weird, like the balance wasn't right, I think.
Well, I'll say the situation that stemmed from it was humorous to me. Like when they came back in and they were confused as to what happened.
Right, because he's still tied up. Maybe that's like, where I'm going with that.
Yeah, the situation after
that whole...
it spawned some humor that worked for me. But overall, it felt a little weird. Yeah, I don't know. I just kept thinking, I wish this were leading into the darkness just a bit more.
Yeah, and on that note, I also wanted to talk about the humor that they try to get out of the cops, because I think, as we've said so far, that some of the humor that they try to get out of the Chechens is diminishing to like the danger that Barry might be in. And I think they do the same thing with the cops. Like, I think there's a lot of humor that's tried to like be milked out of the cops, and that didn't work for me at all. Like maybe even more so than the Chechens. How did you guys feel about the cops and their whole vibe?
That didn't bother me as much. I think the main detective, the woman detective that dates Henry Winkler's character, I could see her trying to be funny a lot, and a lot of the jokes that like didn't work for me. Like there's a joke at the very beginning where Henry Winkler is like hitting on her, and he's like really confident, you know, and you're like, oh, it's like this old white man hitting on this like strong young black detective woman. That's a funny thing, you know, like what a silly couple. But it's not really a joke, but then later it pays off so well, you know? So the joke that didn't work for me episodes earlier doesn't bother me as much because it's a huge plot point now, these two dating, you know, and it ties in with the end of the finale really well. So I can't think of any jokes that they did that bothered me that much, but the ones that did felt like they were so relevant to the plot that I was able to forgive them later for not being very funny.
Yeah, the only thing I really remember from the cops is that she locked them out of the footage, which didn't necessarily seem like a joke to me. It's been a while, granted, since I've seen it, but that's the main thing I remember from it.
Yeah, that's part of what I'm talking about. Like, to me, that whole scene was played as like a humorous, like them trying to get into it and figure out what's going on. And I remember her like kind of quipping and supposed to be giving these like smart quips back to like the people and like shutting them down. And it felt like it was played for humor to me. And maybe I just misread the vibe of those scenes. That's possible.
I think that's less egregious than a lot of the laugh out loud stuff that was attempted by the villains.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
Maybe so. Maybe they play off of each other for me, because both of the potential danger points for Barry are played up for humor more than they are like serious. I guess the cops they have more serious scenes when they actually get like on and investigating. But there was like, the one that turned me off, I think, was like in the first episode or maybe the second, where they get photos from like the crime scene from the first episode, and there's like the one detective is crying, and she's like, is this guy crying in all of the like crime scene photos? And like it turns out that like his wife left him or something like that, and like that was played up for like a lot of humor and felt like it was supposed to be really funny.
Yeah, I think that also kind of foreshadowed what she was going to have to do with Henry Winkler later on, right? Because they said something about it, like, you're married to the job, you know, like the job comes first, and that's why, implying that that's why his wife had left him. And then later on, she has to leave Henry Winkler because of the job, because of the investigation.
Yeah.
But you're right, I don't know that it was hilarious. And I do also agree with you that those two plot lines are the weakest. And where I think this show really shines is the acting, studio sequences, and the suspense sequences that happen later on.
Right. So I wanted to talk about one thing that did work for me. The friend that Barry added on Facebook, you know, and how that whole plot line played out with it, you know,
right.
His friend. Yeah. What was his friend's name?
Chris.
Okay. So the way the whole Chris plot line played out, I thought was really effective. especially for Bill Hader's performance. I think it's episode 7, right? Is the big episode? Is that right?
Yeah, and we're bringing spoilery, right? So you type the episode where
so basically
yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, so basically it's the episode where Chris starts getting regrets for having joined Barry in his plot, and he starts wanting to come clean with the cops and with his family because he's feeling guilty because he had to shoot somebody, and he tells Barry he's going to come clean, and once he does that, Barry has to shoot him. But it works so well because he brings it up and then he realizes he made a mistake bringing that up to Barry, telling him he wanted to come clean. And you can just see him try to backpedal, right? And be like, I'm not going to tell anybody. My wife knows I'm here. Like, people know I'm with you. Like, everything he can think of. And it's just, I don't know, the dread you feel there really landed for me.
Yeah, that sequence really works for me. And how you start off at one point and then you move, and it's just so great. And they both realize what's going to happen. And Chris realizes, oh, I've crossed a line. And it plays on their faces. I think that might be the best scene in the whole series. And I think it's just really great in the suspense and the dread that's happening.
Yeah. I think out of the drama action, so like Breaking Bad part of the show, that's what I call it. I don't know if that's totally accurate, but I think that is like the best part that comes out of all of that. Like better than the end, like whenever Barry's talking to the girl, the detective,
the cop.
Yeah.
Do we want to talk about that sequence?
Sure.
Yeah, let's talk about it. This is when the detective, after everything's been said and done, the police think they've solved the crime. She's at a home, I guess like a vacation home of Henry Winkler's character with Barry and Sally, and they're all hanging out, and that's when the detective figures it out based on like a conversation they have at dinner. So she's figured it out, and Barry figures out that she figured it out, and they have a confrontation.
Yeah, so I really like this sequence too. It felt a little tagged on maybe because it felt like everything had ended, but then I thought that there was a lot of suspense, and also Bill Hader's performance when he's just like, please, we can go back to our normal lives. Like, please don't, let's not do this. Let's just go back. And he's pleading with her, and I enjoyed both their performances in this, and I thought it was also very suspenseful. And then, as he's walking at gunpoint, and you see the gun taped to the tree, I thought it was really well done.
I really like that scene as well. This is kind of what I was talking about that pays off so well later. Like the initial scene when Henry Winkler is hitting on the detective, I was like, this is going to be a painful season to watch, because this isn't funny to me. But then it becomes so important, and it becomes so wrapped up in their characters. And then you kind of said you felt like it was tacked on. I don't think it feels that way. I think this is the perfect way to end season 1. If they hadn't been renewed, it'd have been a great ending. And since they are renewed, I think, when they come back for season 2, it's going to create all of a sudden an interesting place for Barry to have to scramble out of, Yeah.
Right. And when I said tagged on, I just meant I thought everything was over, and then all of a sudden this new sequence takes place. I enjoyed it.
Oh yeah, me too.
But I just was surprised that it goes in for so long afterwards, right? So that was kind of my take on it.
Yeah. Without this scene, like until that happened, I was really hoping there wouldn't be a season 2 of Barry, even though I think it was already announced that there was. Like, without that scene, I think that this show would be a perfect like one season and done show. Like, I didn't know how much story there was to tell, and I guess this opens that up. I'm okay with that. I don't know that I'll watch the second season unless like we really want to talk about it on the show, but we'll see. If I just have time, I think I'm not that interested. Like, I'm not dying to see it. If they don't do another one, like, I'm perfectly happy. I think it also ended off on like a good place to just stop it here.
Yeah, I think it ended in a good place, but while I'm not clamoring for a season 2, I'm definitely going to give it a shot because, like I said earlier, this seems like a show that could easily find its legs in season 2 and kind of really find its voice. So maybe season 2 would be, more of what we're hoping for, or maybe the comedy balance and tone will be a little better adjusted.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mike. I think that there is potential in this show for sure, and hopefully they can kind of see what we didn't like about the show and then fix it.
Well, sure. I mean, but the thing is, it's like, it's such an easy watch. It's so short and bingeable that even if you don't end up being into season 1, you can finish it so fast and get into season 2 if everyone's talking about it or something, you know? So all in all, I'd say this is a solid season 1 that's very easy to watch. But, hopefully it gets a little stronger and finds its legs is kind of what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Do you guys want to talk about the acting stuff at all? I know we all kind of mentioned how that's like the best part of the show, and we haven't really touched on it too much. Like, I think that the girl character, Sally, and her acting career and kind of following everything that's going on with her has like this sort of like brutally honest truth to it. And I think that a lot of that is what really works for me. Like, that's a part of the show that feels very real and very grounded. And I find it, really interesting compared to like some of the more action stuff that's a bit cartoonish,
Yeah, sure. The relentlessly depressing life of someone who's trying to become a professional actor, and the brutally just self-degrading situations they find themselves in sometimes.
Yeah. Like, probably my most emotional moment of the show was when she was with her agent, or the guy who was like maybe going to be her agent and feeling her out. And then he kind of made the joke about like having sex with her. And when she turned him down, he was kind of like, of course, I'm just kidding. And then like next thing you know, he's done representing her. Like that got to me like emotionally more than anything else.
Yeah, that was pretty tough to watch.
I don't remember that scene that well. What?
Oh.
I remember it. I'm just trying to think. What episode was that in?
I think it was
off the top of my head. I don't know, but yeah, it was in the middle. Like, she went to like an audition, and then when they came out and asked her who her representation was, they were like, "Oh yeah, we called him, and he said he doesn't represent you anymore."
That's right. I remember that. That sucks. What a terrible situation.
Yeah,
and it's good to see that in a show, right? Like, it's good to see. I mean, we all know that happens, right? But it's refreshing to see like the honest side of it, not the happily ever after side of it, Like
and it's
like La La Land was kind of like a happily ever after.
Yeah, and I think it's a credit to the show to make that as important, or like feel as important as it did to me, when you have people dying and like the Chechen mob and Bolivian, crime syndicate or whatever they're called. You have all of that going on and like people being assassinated, but to balance that out with like a girl who tries to get her acting career off the ground and gets like fucked over, like balancing those two seems difficult. And like, I think they did a good job of making that feel just as heavy and important at times. Yeah.
And there was actually a really sad audition from Henry Winkler's character as well. It's like he'd been there so many times and he knows what's going to happen. So he walks in there and he's like, I've got the one line 2 ways. He says it the 2 ways and then walks out. And he heads this class and teaches this class, but he's essentially a nobody in Hollywood. He just teaches this class. And I thought that was really sad and eye-opening,
It's sad on the whole, like if you take a step back and look at it, but I thought that scene was actually really funny.
Oh, yeah.
Because his confidence, he's like, okay, I'm going to give it to you 2 ways and then I'm done. And he just like was like so matter-of-fact about it. Like, compare that to Sally, who like when she has an audition, she puts like everything onto like all of her hopes and dreams on it,
Right, but he'd been down this road so many times before that he's just like, well, hopefully I get a call back. I don't know if I will, but he doesn't necessarily care that much anymore, right?
Yeah, he's been burned so many times.
Right.
Yeah, and generally I liked seeing Barry try to go in there and do this acting class when he had like no acting experience at all. And like I enjoyed scenes where he would like read the line and then would stop and be like, Barry, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, I don't know, reading the line, I guess. Like, I just like his like lack of knowledge, like I think is really entertaining and interesting, like throughout that whole class.
Right. I did enjoy the scene in episode 7 where he's just killed Chris. He makes it to the show and he's just basically so emotionally devastated that he's crying anyways. And he's got this one line to deliver, and his line makes her so much better. And like, she's already a pretty decent actress, but then because he's crying, it's just I thought that was a really great scene.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, she's able to feed off of it and just roll with it.
Yeah,
Makes her
it
better.
drives the whole acting is reacting and acting is listening sort of thing. And that scene is one of the things I would watch season 2 for, because even in that moment where he does that, it has nothing to do with him becoming a better actor. And he's not really learned anything about acting, I would say. Like, he just had a really emotional moment and would came out and said his line while being emotional. So, I kind of wanted to see him maybe grow as an actor and try different things, which I don't think we ever really got in season 1. So that the potential for that in the future does make me excited. I would be interested in seeing more of that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
I
and
agree.
they were in the play together, so maybe we'll get some of that.
Yeah. And last thing for me, I really enjoyed the very, very, very last moment of the series after it's implied that he killed the cop and goes back to bed. And I think we get a close up of him laying there, and he just says starting now.
All right, the return to that joke.
Yeah, and then it just ends.
Yeah. I thought that was a really cool place to end it. And a really funny, thing that's relatable, because I think we've all probably been there on things we wanted to stop doing. I've wanted to give up Coke and soda a few times in my life, and every now and then when I'm trying to do it, I'm I'll have a soda and I'll be okay, starting now, no more. And I just the kind of mundaneness of that line compared to what he just did was humorous to me.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Absolutely. Anyone got anything else?
No, I'm good. I'm eager to move on to the tale.
Yeah, me too.
All right.
The story you're about to see is true, as far as I know. When I was a child, I was obsessed with changing myself. Now I don't even remember who I used to be.
Jennifer, sweetheart, I found a story that you wrote in English class.
Where'd you find it?
What matters is what it says.
So before we get into the tale, we just wanted to let you know that we're going to have a non-spoiler section. So if you haven't seen the movie, you can keep listening, and we'll give you plenty of warning before we move into spoilers.
Yep.
The IMDb synopsis: an investigation into one woman's memory as she is forced to examine her first sexual relationship and the stories we tell ourselves in order to survive. What do you guys think about that one?
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's a little long-winded, a lot of syllables in their words in there.
Yeah.
I think the longest one in Barry was Hitman, which is 2. That's kind of just 2 words smushed together.
Did it challenge you?
Yeah, I don't like it.
3-syllable words are hard sometimes. I get it.
Yeah. There's a 4-syllable word in there.
Oh,
relationship. There's 2 4-syllable words in there. I hate it.
Yeah,
Get out of here.
Above his
IMDb.
reading level.
Yeah.
No, but I'd say that's a pretty accurate description of the movie.
Yeah, I think so.
So who wants to start off with their expectations for the tale?
I'll start off. Mine are pretty simple. It's that I had none because I hadn't even heard of it whenever you suggested that we maybe do this one for the podcast. I had no idea what it was about or where it came from. I knew it kind of premiered on HBO, so I thought maybe it was a HBO developed and shot movie, but I think HBO just bought it.
It premiered in Sundance. Correct.
Yeah, and then put it out. So, I had no idea what it was about. I knew Laura Dern was in it from the HBO thumbnail image, but that's it. So I had 0 expectations.
Yeah, I'm kind of right there with you. I think Mike had actually mentioned something about it being in Sundance and being disappointed that HBO bought it because it wasn't going to play in the theaters. But I'm kind of 0 expectation. I read the IMDb synopsis beforehand, so I kind of knew where it was going to go. And so I didn't have a lot of expectations.
Yeah, so to be honest, I didn't really know a whole lot about it other than just kind of the basic plot, which I guess that's all you really need to know. It's not much more to it.
I feel like the less you know, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. To be honest, I wasn't expecting something this effective. I remember people raving about it after Sundance, and I've seen a few movies about this similar subject matter, that have stayed with me for a while. So I didn't expect this one to really reach those heights, I'd seen movies like Mysterious Skin, and I was thinking how could, this movie affect me any more than that one, But I think this movie, what it attempts to do is something a little different than what I've seen before. And now I'm kind of getting into what I thought about the movie, so let me just go ahead and transition into what I thought. So I was really intrigued by this movie because of Laura Dern. I've always loved Laura Dern, pretty much since I first saw her in Jurassic Park, right? She's amazing.
Of course.
Yeah, she's not in enough things for my money. For the first few minutes of this movie, though, I was not enjoying myself. And maybe enjoying is the wrong word, but for a bit, I was not able to get into it. However, that being said, once this movie starts being about what it's really about, there are some really great moments. The way Jennifer Fox uncovers information in a very creative and effective way is something I don't think I've seen in very many movies. There are revelations that come from Laura Dern getting more information through the course of the movie, and her remembering things that made my stomach drop. That said, there are some really rough scenes to watch, acting-wise, especially from like the mom character, but we can get into that later. What about you guys?
Go ahead, Chris.
So, yeah, I'm kind of right there with you, Mike. I had a pretty emotional response to this movie, like, especially after the last couple of years and people coming out like Cosby and stuff like that. I know it's not necessarily the same situation, but I had a really emotional response where I was really angry for a while. And this movie will probably stick with me for a long while. I don't think I'll be able to see Jason Ritter like play another part for a while. I'm going to have to give him some time, put him on the shelf because of how good of a job he does in this. It's a really tough part, I think.
Yeah.
I think this movie is really well done in the way it's told. I was kind of on board from the beginning, I think. There was a couple of things that maybe take a little while to get in, but I was on board as they're telling the story, you know, like as she's telling the story going back.
Yeah, there's some pretty clunky stuff, I think, but like I said, once it starts being about what it's really about.
Yeah, I think it is really sad that HBO bought this because I think Laura Dern could be in the running for an Oscar with this movie. I think she gives a really subtle performance. Ellen, what is her last name?
Burstyn. Ellen Burstyn.
Yeah, Ellen Burstyn is really good in this as the mother and trying to figure out where she went wrong. Like I said, Jason Ritter's really good. And then the little girl, there are some pretty tough scenes, like you were saying, Mike, but I think the little girl is engaging and keeps you interested in that side of the story as well. Yeah, so those are my thoughts, and we can get into some more in-depth stuff later. What did you think, Justin?
So I'm going to caveat what I'm about to say about what I thought about the film with the fact that I think subject matter like this is very difficult to be negative about. You know, I think it's hard to be negative on it without like worrying that people are going to think that like you don't care about what the message of the movie is. I think that this film is very clearly like personal to the director. I believe if I remember correctly, I read that it was her own story that she wanted to tell. Like this all actually like really happened to her.
That's true.
And that comes through, I think. And I feel like everyone involved in making this movie feels very strongly about this issue and the things that are going on in it. And so that's all there. And I appreciate that. I appreciate the love that went into this movie and what it wants to do and wants to say and wants to leave you feeling, you know. But I really didn't like the movie. At no point, I was where you were, Mike, where like that first, 15 minutes, I thought was kind of exceptionally bad to the point where I wasn't into it at all. And to me, the movie only slightly recovered from there. I think that for the most part, this movie felt like a Lifetime movie in terms of script and a lot of times acting, and in some ways the way that it was shot, although it kind of feels like a Lifetime movie, but on sort of like an indie plus budget, like an indie budget that will get Laura Dern and Jason Ritter and Ellen Burstyn, you know? But that's the vibe that I kept getting a lot. I feel like I was just watching like a Lifetime movie with a lot of money and a lot of star power behind it. I think that to me comes from basically like uninteresting photography, and more importantly than that, like I thought the writing seemed very weird and like odd at times. Like I wasn't buying the lines that were coming out of the actors. I don't know if I can like confidently blame that on the script as opposed to like actors maybe improving scenes. And maybe it all falls on the acting, because I thought most of the acting was bad. I actually, as much as I love Laura Dern, I didn't think she was that good in it apart from a couple of scenes. I thought her boyfriend Common was particularly bad in it.
It's true of a lot of Common. I think he's just a bad actor.
Yeah,
he's
think
in the
so.
show Hell on Wheels, and I watched that whole thing, and I don't think he was very good in one episode of that show.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mike, and disagree with you, Chris, that Ellen Burstyn was really good in it, because I think she was quite bad most of the time.
She's the worst part of the movie, in my opinion.
Common doesn't have a lot of the movie, and I think if he had more of the movie, or if they were sharing equal screen time, I would think Common was the worst part. But since the mom has more of it, I think you're right. I think the actress that comes out of this looking the best is the little girl. I think you're right, Chris, that she has a lot of tough scenes to do, and she plays them really well. And that's certainly the most interesting part of the movie, is when she's on screen. But outside of that, like that's really like the only high note or bright point for me out of this movie, because I truly, truly did not like it at all.
So I want to respond to a couple things you said, right? So
sure.
I agree with you that the diet, like a lot of it feels like a Lifetime movie, and that's mainly all the stuff that's not what the movie's about. Like, the movie is so about one thing that it's to its detriment, because at no point in the movie are the characters talking about anything else, right? And when the characters only talk about one thing, and just that one thing, and it's not sprinkled in throughout like normal day conversations, it seems like you're watching a Lifetime movie, because literally the movie starts and like Laura Dern's chilling, and her mom calls her because she found some paper that she wrote when she was a kid. And her mom's like really upset because she didn't know all the terrible stuff that was going on when Laura Dern was a child. And so just that whole conversation, and every conversation the mom and Laura Dern have, it's shot badly. It's always like a two-shot of two people sitting there against a wall or in a car, and they're just spouting off stuff like, if I'd have known, I'd have been sick, you know, or I remember that day. My red flags were all up, you know, like I was so worried about you. And it's just like weird ways that people don't really talk to each other, you know?
Yeah, and I agree. And I don't know if that's writing or bad acting.
Well, I think it's a little bit of the script issue more than anything, because like I said, it's just so to the point. Every single thing they say, there's just no subtlety to it at all. It's just so to the point. Like there's no way to, I don't know. It's just, the movie has no agenda but to be about this one idea. That said, once Laura Dern starts remembering things, I think there are some really creative and really smart things that they do that help the movie become more interesting and more disturbing at the same time. And I think if you allow yourself to go down that road and focus on what the movie is doing well, there are some really good things in here. And I will also say that I disagree. I think Laura Dern is fantastic, and I think there are 3, maybe 4 really great performances in this movie, and everyone else is terrible. Jason Ritter is good, Laura Dern is good, that little girl is good, like you were saying, but I think the breakout star is Elizabeth Debicki.
Is that the
Miss G,
the younger version? Yeah,
Miss G. That performance to me stole the movie, and almost carried it through all the terrible stuff that, from a filmmaking standpoint, that I hate. Right.
Yeah, I would agree there. And I think maybe a lot of this we can talk about in spoilers, unless there's anything else we need to talk about before that.
I'm ready to move on. There's not a whole lot to talk about, not in spoilers, and it's also kind of a hard movie to spoil.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly.
To not spoil.
Or not spoil. I don't know. It's weird because like the plot really says, like the IMDb synopsis really is the entire plot. It's just how the information is revealed.
How it's presented to you.
Yeah, I think it can be spoiled, and I wouldn't want to ruin that for anybody.
Yeah, for sure. Quickly, do you guys want to, I guess, recommend it? I think we could probably all gather, but like, and since it's on HBO, it's not like a theater thing, but you know, is it worth watching?
Sure. So I'll go first. I would say if you've seen movies about this kind of subject matter before, it's not worse than things like Mysterious Skin. It's not harder to watch than a lot of those movies. So if you've seen any kind of movies about this before, you're probably prepared for it. But if you've not seen any of those movies, I can see this movie being very impactful. So I think everyone should see it. It's on HBO. Just be prepared that there are some rough edges to this thing, but I think it's worth it in the end.
Yeah, I'll go next on that. And I would recommend it wholeheartedly, too. There are things in this movie that made me see things differently about those situations.
Sure, me too.
And for that, it's worth it because it opened my eyes to certain things about the victims and why they act the way they do or why things happen the way they do that I had not thought about before. And yeah, I think it's worth it for that. And I'm just a little bit higher up on it than both of you for sure. But yeah, I recommend it wholeheartedly.
Yeah, that's 2 recommendations.
Yeah, I mean, probably not surprising, but I wouldn't recommend it. I mean, if you have HBO now and, you're already paying for it, I guess it's free, so why not? If you have the time, I think there are better movies that are, more well-made, better written, better acted about the same subject matter that, like, I took all the same points away from. Like, personally, I didn't get anything new out of this film compared to like the other films I've seen, which, as you've mentioned, Mike, Mysterious Skin. I think also Little Children is another one that comes to mind.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good movie.
I think both of those movies are vastly better than this one. So if you haven't seen either of those, I would recommend those instead of this. But if you want like a third movie to throw in there, why not? But as far as like the graphic nature of it, I do feel compelled to say if you do watch it, like, warning, there is some like scenes that are probably going to be difficult to watch if you haven't experienced them before. I know when I recommended Mysterious Skin when I worked at Blockbuster, when we all worked at Blockbuster, I actually got like complaints to my manager for recommending a movie that contained scenes that are similar to other scenes in this film. So
they probably thought you were some weird pervert.
Yeah, people are affected by it differently. So just like, if you're hesitant, maybe look up what it's about and go ahead and, spoil
there's a
some
disclaimer
things.
at the beginning of the movie that's this is heavy.
It's a tough movie to watch for sure.
That's my recommendation. Just watch with caution. I even go out of your way to like find out what things happen. So if you're at all worried about that, because I don't think it ruins the movie at all, because I don't think anything that's not obvious happens in this movie.
Sure. Well, one quick, before we move on, I just want to say I kind of disagree with you, and we'll talk about it here in a minute. I think there are things that this movie offers that things like the movies you mentioned earlier do not offer.
Yeah, there's definitely. And
this movie brings something to the table in the conversation and makes me look at things in a way that I hadn't before, and I'm extremely grateful to this movie for doing that.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to hearing what those things are. Like, I'm open to those things that I didn't catch, for sure.
All right, so with that, are we ready?
Yes, we are.
All right, let's do this thing.
Let's spoil the tale.
No, I guess Rosebud is just a piece in a jigsaw puzzle.
I'll tell you what, give me one of those cigarettes you got up there. I'll tell you all about it.
And here we go.
So yeah, now that we're in spoiler territory, I'm personally like really interested to see what it is that we were just talking about, that you guys, took things away from this movie that you wouldn't have if you hadn't seen this movie. So I want to hear about that. So whichever one of you wants to go first.
All right, I'll go first. So I think there's a couple moments specifically that stand out to me as something very effective in the way that it unfolds. So at the beginning of the movie, we know that Laura Dern's character has been in a relationship with adults when she was a teenager, or she had been. And we get her point of view on this, her memories of this, and connecting with these adults and feeling like she had a really good relationship with them and that she was navigating this relationship and she thought she knew what it was. And then she sees a picture of herself the summer that she's remembering, and she realizes, oh, I was much younger than I thought I was. So then she recontextualizes the whole thing. So we get the same scenes with a younger actress who's only a couple years younger. But at that age, a couple years makes all the difference. And then all of a sudden, it goes from a creepy scene to an unsettling scene. Because then you have this woman who was preying on a teenager earlier, but now she's preying on like a tween.
Like a barely teenager.
Yeah, and it's just, that was upsetting. So like I found that portrayal of how memories can betray us fascinating, because that's how memories work. you at the time you think you're old enough at the time, so you go your whole life thinking, well, I was old enough, I made my decisions, I was smart, I knew what I was doing. And then you see a picture of yourself that age and you're like, God, you know, I look at kids now and I realize I was not that old at all. You know, there's another scene where she remembers it differently, and then all of a sudden she remembers she was cold, and she's like, why was I cold? Oh yeah, there was a fire. And she didn't remember there was a fire at all. And then all of a sudden
she remembered the fire being there, and then the scene changes to where he's like, I meant to light this fire, but I forgot. So.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. So the idea that like memories can betray you, and these things that, and then you start to remember, like, wait a minute, did I know what I was doing? Like, I thought I did, because you always think you're smart and old enough and wise enough at the time. But the idea to go back and recontextualize that with new information that you were too stupid to see at the time because you were a kid. The way that all unfolds, I thought was really well done. And like almost out of a completely different movie than I had been watching before.
I don't think that you're wrong about that. I think what was distracting to me at the time was going to like specifically that like fireplace scene. I felt it was a little bit heavy-handed at that point of like going from warm lighting, like from a fire, and the scene being kind of, you know, warm in her memories, to like when she realizes that there was actually no fire and she misremembered it, to like it all of a sudden being like gloomy and cold looking. Like that whole scene felt very heavy-handed to me. So I was kind of stuck on that more than actually thinking about what you're saying. So I don't know, maybe a more subtle version of that I think would have been more successul. But
what about the first one?
That's just me.
Where she recontextualizes her memories as a younger actress. Did that not do anything for you at all?
It didn't do much for me, because the difference from going from 15 to 16 to 12 and 13, it is a lot, but I don't necessarily think that one is so much worse than the other that it actually affected me in any like tangible way at the time. Like I was just like, okay, she was 13. Like it's still like, it's bad, and it was bad before. So I don't know. It didn't really change anything for me. Like I still felt the same way about it.
I really enjoyed the recontextualization of the memories. I thought that that's the thing that worked really well for me, especially, and you're right, either one of them's bad, but I guess I don't know. But
there's a difference mentally.
Yeah.
And there's a difference between what a 12-year-old / 13-year-old versus a 16-year-old is able to comprehend. Like, it's both wrong, you're right.
But yeah, just when she goes from that older girl to this...
And like, the smiles mean something completely different.
Yeah.
The glances to each other. Yeah. Like, she thought this was a relationship where she was, like, old enough to where it was a peer type thing. Like, she is seeing me as a woman, and that is what is appealing about me, and she gets me. All of a sudden, 2 years later, oh, no, she didn't see me as a woman. She saw me as a child, and that was the whole idea. So this relationship that I thought was something that in my brain I justified because I thought it was okay and consensual. Turns out I didn't even know what the hell I was doing. I was a kid. I look back to whenever I was 15 or 16 versus to when I was 12 or 13. Mentally, that's way different. I mean, I didn't go through anything like this, thank goodness, but I wasn't as smart, and I wouldn't have been able to perceive as much, but I would have thought I would have been able to at the time, you know? When I was 13, I wouldn't have thought to myself, I'm not smart enough, you know?
Right. We all think that we're super smart where we're at now, but in 5 years, we're going to look back.
Hindsight's better, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that all makes sense to me. I think, like, I guess I was already, like, viewing the 15, 16-year-old stuff, like, as deplorable already, and, like, to me, it was just, like, it was just another degree of that, like, I guess I was already so down on it that, like, I didn't, you know, it didn't move me enough.
Well, sure, but I don't think the point of the movie was to ever say there's a moral ground between which age is worse. I think the point the movie's trying to make is how your memories can betray you. It's how you personally can justify something to yourself and not realize it's terrible. Like it's the difference between how mature you are mentally and what you can comprehend, not necessarily is the crime equally bad or not, right?
Yeah, no, right. I was just answering your question of like whether or not did that not that particular revelation not move me or make me feel like worse or whatever.
But what I'm saying is, did you at least understand why it would upset Laura Dern and potentially, I guess, Jennifer Fox in this situation? Like, do you think that this revelation would make a difference to you personally in this situation?
To me personally, yeah. I mean, I think it would. I think that
Which
maybe
is what
the
it's
movie...
about, right? It's about her personal experience. So, like, did you at least follow her emotional journey through that revelation, I guess, is what I meant.
Not really.
Okay.
To be totally honest, I don't if that's a fault of the filmmaking, maybe, or maybe I was just so checked out at that point, or like I didn't feel very much from that revelation overall.
It worked for me, and especially because of the memory, because she remembers herself as basically an adult, and then she realizes, and Mike's already gone over all this. But the other thing that Mike said that was interesting too, that was one of the relationships or revelations for me, is she's 48. She was 13 at the time, and she still thinks of what happened as a relationship. She doesn't think of herself as a victim.
Exactly. Which is what I thought was so interesting, and what I was so skeptical about when the movie started. I was thinking, if she already knows about this, how am I going to feel bad for someone who hasn't felt bad about it herself for 30 years?
So the thing that really was pointed out to me by this movie is one of the complaints oftentimes that I hear when women come forward years and years later to say that this, like Bill Cosby or whoever it is, did these things to them. And it's because they're dealing with their own shit, and maybe they don't even realize what happened exactly, or why or how, and so they're just having to deal with all this. And it's just, that was really powerful to me that she was 48, didn't think of herself as a victim. And I think that last scene with the little girl where she's explaining why she doesn't think of herself as a victim was really interesting as well. Yeah.
That's exactly what I wanted to talk about next, actually. I'm glad you brought that up. So the interview style, like, she's a journalist. So a lot of this is presented in the style of interviewing what she imagines those figures to be like at the time, right? Her 13-year-old self and Mr. and Mrs. G, or whatever their names were. Mrs. G and whatever the guy's name was. She basically imagines them. I guess she never really interviews the guy. But like Mrs.
No, we never talked to him at all.
Yeah. When she's interviewing her 13-year-old self, she says, like, don't you realize you'll never get married? This is going to mess with you in ways you don't understand yet. And the 13-year-old knows everything. She's like, I don't care. I don't want to get married anyway. Being married is stupid. And it's like, oh, you're 13. You don't know what you're talking about. And that's upsetting. Oh, and then the imaginary interview she has with Mrs. G, where she's like, look, I'm just diving into this because I want to know you. I want to understand you. And she's just like, you never will. You can't. And I think that's really poignant, right? Because that's what victims do. They try to go back and they try to rationalize and they try to reframe this to make sometimes their assaulters, they try to spin them into something good, like it's not their fault.
Right.
And like, that's something that I've never seen contextualized in a movie quite this way.
Right. The reason victims don't come forward sooner is something that was really interesting to me. Or not even thinking of yourself as a victim. The detective he started to say victim to her at one point, and then he changed to relationship, because to her, it was a relationship still in her head. She wasn't a victim. And to me, a lot of that was just really powerful and really eye-opening.
Well, there's one scene with her boyfriend, Common, whom I agree with Justin is not a good actor, but there's one point where he finds the letters, and she gets upset that he's reading them. And he's like, these are to an adult man. Like, this man was 40. He's my age now. So, like, she had sex with a man who's the same age as her boyfriend at 48 when she was 13, right? And he's got to deal with it, too. Like, he's not going to break up with her, but that's a revelation to him,
Right.
And he doesn't understand. And she gets mad at him for not understanding, even though on some level I think she understands where he's coming from. And she understands that she probably should feel bad about this. So she starts to investigate it, and she realizes, oh, shit.
Yeah.
I didn't get married this whole time. Like, there's another scene, real quick. I'm sorry. Did you have a point you wanted to make real quick? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm going to dive into it. Hold on to it. So you were talking about talking to the 13-year-old girl, doing the interview style with her, right? All of that is perfectly legitimate for her to think because she's been brainwashed, essentially, over the last year by the Jason Ritter character. And
you're so
Mrs.
womanly.
G. She's been set up to fail, essentially.
She's been conditioned to think she's older and more mature than she was.
Right, and we can't fault her for thinking the way she does because she's been told wrong.
Yeah,
right?
She was a 13-year-old listening to adults that she idolized.
Yeah, exactly. And that's also very disturbing to me, you know?
Yeah, and then there's another scene where she's... And There's another scene, and I found this to be the best scene in the movie, I guess, as far as subtlety goes. And it's really not that subtle. But the rest of the movie is not subtle at all, so... But it's the scene where she's talking to one of her students about their first sexual experience. And the student's a little uncomfortable, but she's like, hey, you got to talk about it because how are you going to talk about a million other things with people, And so the student starts to describe her first sexual experience when she was 17 or 18. And it seemed pretty innocent. She had a boyfriend that she'd been dating for a while, and they were both clueless. And it was cute, that resembles probably most first sexual experiences for most people, Cut to Laura Dern, who is not identifying with this student at all while she's talking. And as the student goes on, she's starting to realize how fucked up her first sexual experience really was. She was, for the lack of a better word, conditioned physically and mentally into being able to do it with a grown-up the first time, which is very messed up, right? You should be clueless about it. You should be with someone who doesn't know what they're doing, not a grown-up who knows exactly how to condition a child into being able to physically do this.
Right. I mean, the physical part is even more... I mean, both of them are...
Right.
It's
gross. Just realizing as she's listening to her student talk about a healthy sexual awakening, she dives into this terrible self-loathing. And I found that pretty sad to watch.
Yeah, if we can stay with the idea of, subtlety, I understand... the connection to the scene and what the scene's trying to do. But I think an issue that I had with the movie overall is the lack of subtlety. It's all basically, like you said earlier, it's about one thing, and every character in it is talking about that one thing and being really on the nose about everything that it's talking about.
Certainly,
that scene specifically, I didn't even buy it because it was so on the nose. I wasn't into that scene at all. And that happens in other parts of the movie, even towards the end when she confronts the older version of Bill and talks to him, there's nothing to really think about any further because it's all giving it to you right there on the surface, to the movie's own detriment.
I mean, you're not wrong, but I would argue that what it's putting out there has value. So while it is on the nose, and it is very on the nose, to the movie's detriment, this movie could be much better, and I wish it were. What it does do effectively, I can't deny, And to me, the shortcomings of the movie were not enough to make me not emotionally there for the important parts. I didn't walk away with it as impacted as I did whenever I first saw Mysterious Skin, or like you mentioned earlier, Little Children. I'm sure there's other movies that I can't think of right now, but this movie made me think about age and memory and perception in ways that other movies did not, So it has value, and I would say it's definitely worth your time because you don't have to pay to go to the movies to see it. If you've got HBO, give it a watch.
For me, too, the age and memory part, if it had just been, say, from the little girl's point of view, the whole movie, seeing the little girl older, later in life, is what worked for me, and the memories. And I think it's really worth it. And I've seen I like Mysterious Skin and Little Children, but I think that this fits in there a little bit more, and it is on the nose. But the things that you get to talk about afterward are what was on the nose. These things happen, or what it's like for the victims, and how they don't necessarily, they haven't even processed it themselves, and I think that those are very important things to think and talk about.
Sure. And like I said at the beginning, I want to caveat all my negative thoughts on the film with the fact that it's an important subject matter to have out there and discuss, and it's obviously very personal, and everyone involved, I'm sure, has strong feelings about it, and that all makes something at a bare minimum worthwhile. I don't think it shouldn't exist, or anything, or it's a waste of time to do this, because it puts something out there, puts a conversation out there, puts a cathartic message out there with the end with Laura Dern telling off the guy. If you feel strongly about that, or if you've been in that situation, I think there's a very cathartic moment right there for you to be invested in. And I think that all of the things that you guys are saying, like the memory, the perception, the age flashing back and forth, to me, I've seen that done, all of that verbatim is in Mysterious Skin in a much more subtle way.
But Mysterious Skin's trying to do something different, though. That's where I come down. The movies on the surface are about the same thing, sure. But what they are bringing to the table and into the conversation are not quite the same, in my opinion. And we could talk about that more if you want to. Yeah. But I would argue that Mysterious Skin does have more effective flashbacks that disturbed me more. But the tale is saying something different, I think.
See, I don't necessarily agree with that. I feel like I got all of the same things that the tale says, and all of the same things you guys are saying that the tale says. I got all of that from my first watch of Mysterious Skin. So I don't necessarily feel that it's bringing anything new to the table. And I think comparing it to Mysterious Skin, it's a lesser movie, and that's not the only reason why I think that it's bad. It's not Mysterious Skin was better, so this one sucks. I want to stress that I think it's full of other technical things that stand in the way, in terms of writing, acting, photography. I think a lot of that stands in the way of a much better film. And yeah, and we kind of agree on that point, I think to varying degrees, but
yeah, well, we definitely agree that as technically this movie is a mess, right?
Yeah,
it's ugly. It's all the peripheral characters, in my opinion, are bad actors. But spoilers for Mysterious Skin.
Yeah.
This movie, unlike Mysterious Skin, this movie focuses on the point of view of not blacking out and having to remember something that you thought was so terrible, but how something you didn't think was so terrible actually probably was, and that you are an idiot. Your memories betray you. In Mysterious Skin,
that's what Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character goes through in Mysterious Skin, is that same thing.
Not necessarily.
So you have both point of view.
He remembered the whole thing, and as a result, I think he had come to terms with it a long time ago. And as a result, Mysterious Skin, again, spoilers, ends with Joseph Gordon-Levitt comforting the other one and letting him know, look, it's going to suck from here on out. But he already knew it sucked, and he'd already come to terms with it. This is someone who is middle-aged, who is re-perceiving her entire identity because her first sexual experience and her first delve into adulthood, which she has probably to some level carried around with her as a cornerstone of who she is. This is her recontextualizing that whole thing and then being broken as an older person. This is Mysterious Skin is a young person who lied to themselves about trauma and discovered there was a different trauma under the surface. So they're similar.
That's one of the characters of Mysterious Skin. The other one, I think, is almost exactly in line with Laura Dern, except, you're right with the age difference, because I think by the end of the movie, he's still only maybe 20, and Laura Dern's 48. So you're right that it is an older person who still hasn't come to terms with it. But I think Joseph Gordon-Levitt, at the beginning of the movie and through most of the movie, sees it as something that happens. Even his narration in it is he was it's not very condemning of what's happened. And I think only at the point where he's portraying all of this to Brady Corbett's character does he really fully understand what was going on, which is the same revelation that happens in this film.
Yeah, maybe, but in that particular movie, I was completely on board with one victim, whereas I would say the character you're talking about, I don't think goes through the same emotional journey that Laura Dern's character in The Tale does. And I guess you do, and that's where we're going to have to disagree. But in my opinion, this movie delves into that idea in a way that Mysterious Skin was not focused on because, in my opinion, it was focused on the trauma of the other character.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's difference of opinion, I think, and it's what you take away from each movie, and that's different for every person. So I think I can understand, like, if you guys, or either, I don't know what you thought, Chris, but like, if you didn't get that from Mysterious Skin, which is understandable because it's a much subtler, movie, and if you didn't get that, then like, this would feel new. But I pulled that away from it, whether that's actually there or not. So that's where I come down.
To be honest, it's been so long since I've seen Mysterious Skin that I'm not as familiar with it as you guys are. So
I think it came up as one of my favorite. Like, it's one of my favorites. I've seen it like probably 5 or 6 times, and I read the book as well. Not that changes in my opinion on the movie because I saw the movie first.
Right, and you that is one of your favorite movies. I just haven't watched it as much, so I don't have as an informed an opinion to say.
Yeah, so let's talk about the tale.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, well, I mean, it felt like we were kind of wrapping up. Does anyone have any like final thoughts?
This isn't exactly anyone's favorite subject matter, so it's hard to like talk about movies like this in terms of like what's a better movie and what's not. But overall, I think where I come down on it is technically this movie's got a lot of issues, as we've gone over in exhaustive detail. But see it. That's where I come down on it.
I agree.
I disagree. No, I don't totally disagree. It's got value, as I've said. So, watch it if you're so inclined. You could do worse.
All right. Normally about this time at the end of the review, we have some kind of question. What's your favorite whatever? But you know what? This week we're going to skip it. We just had 2 reviews, and we talked about Arrested Development for a long time. So, hey, this is a long episode.
Okay, so that does it for this episode. Thanks as always for listening, especially, an extra thank you to you because this episode is a long one. And thank you, Jake Wagner-Russell, for doing our intro and outro music. If you want to hear more of his music, you can do so at soundcloud.com/bopscotch.
All right, everyone. So that'll do it for this week. Join us next week for Hereditary, and thanks for listening.
Yeah, so if you want to send us any questions about Hereditary or any topics related to that movie that you want us to discuss, or a question for the end of the show, because we'll definitely have one next week.
Or any questions about what we talked about today.
Yeah, you can do so on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Casual Cinecast. You can join our Facebook group and talk film and TV with us at facebook.com/groups/Casual Cinecast. Or if you want to email us directly, you can do so at casualcinemedia@gmail.com.
So I'm thinking that mozzarella cheese is probably one of my favorites. Brie is also really good.
Brie's at the bottom of... I don't even care what other cheeses are out there. Brie's at the bottom.
You don't like brie? Brie's like butter. You
brie.
Just spread it on toast. Oh, it's so good.
It's like butter if butter tasted bad and made things worse.
Yeah, this is just a preview of our Casual Cheese podcast, so make sure you tune into that. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
See you later. Bye-bye.
Thanks for making that episode longer, Chris.
Yeah, I was
cheese joke.
Goddamn cheese, fucking.